Happy Wednesday or maybe Thursday if you're joining us from Asia. Lovely to see you all. Hi, Trina. Hey, Cheryl. Hey, Jenna, Liz. My mum is on the call, Samara. So big welcome to Marianne, who's joining us as well.
Marianne.
Yeah, hi. I'm excited for this conversation. Welcome to Samara. We have folks trickling in from all around the world, but let's kick off because your time is precious and we want to keep this snappy. We're going to keep it to a half hour so that you can get back to work, Netflix, children, running, Pilates, whatever it is that you do. For y'all who I haven't met, my name is Maggie Palmer and I'm the founder and CEO of Pep Talker, a company that's on the mission to close the gender pay gap. So keep our fingers crossed that that happens sooner than the United Nations currently reckons, which is around 1 to 200 years. So there's a depressing statistic for you. But today's conversation will not be depressing because we are joined by the brilliant Samara Bay. And Samara, we were connected through, we've got so many mutual friends. A lot of our friends are at the Tory Burch brand foundation. We have a lot of mutual friends there. And I'm excited to have a conversation with you today about using our voice and about the power of voice to influence our lives, our work, and also the impact that we can have on the world. So thanks so much for joining us. I'm excited.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. I'm thrilled to be here. And hi, everybody. And, you know, I totally 100% honor keeping your video off. But if you do want to put it on, we can even more feel like we're in a shared space together, which, you know, I don't know. I feel like I always want to be more in a shared space. Oh my God, it worked.
Hello, Michelle. Hello, Mary.
A gentle invitation, and you showed up. Hello, hi faces, hi people.
I mean, I'm not sure if anyone's going to be able to rival your really cool wallpaper, but let's see. Maybe as we get more videos, it could happen. You know,
it's not a competition. My wallpaper makes everybody's wallpaper better.
Well, it's such a pleasure, and I also want to pay respect to the elders, past, present, and emerging on the land which we are meeting today, which is all around the world, but I'm on the Shinnecock Nation here today. Samara, you've got a super interesting background and you've accent coached, dialect coached hundreds and hundreds of people, including some names that we probably know: Ricky Martin, Rachel McAdams, I should say, and a bunch of other people. So hopefully we can get some of those interesting stories from you in a second as well. And you do a lot as well supporting women in politics. Because obviously having a clear story and being able to use their voice to create an impact is super important. So I'm excited to hear more from you about that. But you've written a book that came out not long ago called Permission to Speak: How to Change What Power Sounds Like, starting with you. And that's the conversation that we're going to have today. If you've got questions, pop them in the chat. This is going to be super, super interactive. But I want to take us back, Samara, to start with. Tell me about the first moment in your life when you realized that you had a voice and maybe not everyone was okay with it.
Yeah, you know, I didn't realize that until it went away. So this is a story I tell in the introduction of my book, but I did not realize this was an origin story for me until I was really thinking through, why am I interested in this stuff? Why am I interested in rethinking public speaking? Which is what we're really talking about here: decolonizing public speaking, thinking through the ways that society has told us there's one way to sound if you're going to be taken seriously on the global stage. And if you don't happen to sound like that, good luck, try to chase it. Also try to sound authentic. We're here for you. You know, it's such a, there's so many icky messages, but I wasn't clear on this until I must have realized at some point in my teenage years, maybe many of us have, that I came across as bubbly, girly, friendly, right? We can come up with these adjectives, and must have made adjustments accordingly. And I say must have because it really was below the level of conscious thought, right? But none of this was clear to me until I was in my early 20s. I was in the middle of a graduate acting program, and I lost my voice, and it happened over many months, and it was more and more painful to speak until I literally just stopped. And of course was having an existential crisis. Like, I can no longer communicate. I am no longer the version of me that I knew, and I don't know what's happening, and I'm not sick. So there's no obvious solution. And I finally got myself to an ear, nose, and throat doctor who, for any of you, this is one of those memorable experiences. I had this little tiny scope, little camera put up my nose and down the back of my throat, and a photo of my vocal cords emerged. And this is the most interesting part of it. It's not that I was habitually speaking a tiny bit too low. That's interesting. I had to relearn how to talk. That's interesting. The most interesting part is that when I got back to class that day, after missing the morning session because I went to see the doctor, my head of the program stopped class, and in front of everybody, he said, "So, what's the diagnosis?" And barely audibly, pushing through like painful, inflamed vocal cords, I said, "Vocal nodules, I have to go on vocal rest." And he said, "Ah, just as I thought, bad usage." Which is so weird, right? Because it's not even a phrase that has some sort of like agreed upon meaning, but you felt it. I felt it. He basically was saying, yeah, okay, I'm looking at somebody in front of me who's injured, but you did it to yourself. For shame.
Right.
For shame. And that feeling of shame around seeming vocal self-sabotage, I have now learned as a coach and in workshops with literally thousands of women and other people, that many of us know this feeling, and it often feels quite alone. And when it's that universal, it's usually a sign that it's something societal going on and not just us.
Yeah, and listen, pop in the chat, maybe just pop an emoji in the chat if you can relate to what Samara is talking about. If you remember having an experience where you felt shame around your voice, where you felt awkwardness, where you felt like you were judged for your voice. I can remember, Samara, I spent 15 years as a journalist, and at college I was like la 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 la, and then in broadcast journalism, allegedly you're supposed to speak like this, and hello, my name's Maggie Palmer from Channel 10 News, and like that's how you get taken seriously. You have to drop the octave, you have to, and you hear a lot of reporters, they really put it on, and tonight the police caught the perpetrator. It's not conversational like that. It's not normal. It's certainly not up here where maybe I would more naturally want to speak. And so, you're not alone if other folks joining us today are feeling like that. And that experience of shame runs deep, doesn't it? Like I don't remember a moment like you, but I remember being in primary school, and it was the fact that I talked a lot and I was quite happy to talk and I liked chatting, and that wasn't really okay. And so there was this sort of feeling of like a little bit of shame, but sort of like a barrier, like a bit of a veiled curtain that sort of went up, and I was like, okay, there has to be distance, and I actually have to be very conscious of how and when I use my voice, because it's not always accepted in the way that I maybe would naturally in a more childlike state want to communicate. That wasn't okay.
Totally. And what I'm interested in, what I think all of us are interested in this space, is as we find our way in leadership positions, and I'm using that really broadly, right? Because if we're a parent, we're a leader, right? If we are influencing anyone around us, if we care about causes and are talking about them, we are leading. And I'm really interested in all of us taking back the ways in which we've been told that our voice isn't appropriate, and getting curious about that, getting creative with that, and knowing that when we show up with a voice that is higher, as you suggest, that is more playful, that's more conversational, that we are actually being revolutionaries. It is a radical act of social justice to show up as we actually are.
So that's interesting. So I hadn't really thought about our voice as a radical tool before. Like, I mean, as in the words that you say can advocate and change policy, but I'd never thought of the voice as an instrument itself as being radical. That's interesting. Let's talk more about that.
Totally. Yeah. Well, and also naming, of course, that I'm a white lady in this space, and I am on the backs of many linguists and really socially conscious linguists who are talking about the long histories of the ways in which having to adjust, code switch, etc., adds an extra burden onto people who are already feeling like there is a billion ways in which they have to adjust in order to seem quote unquote professional. So when I'm talking about voice biases, what we all know as the ways that we do or don't quickly take someone seriously, the other side of that I'm introducing into the conversation is voice justice. And what does that mean? I mean, it's like a big, wild idea that I would love us to just play with. Well, for me, one of the things it means is noticing our own biases. Why did I discount that person because of how they talk? In what ways do I discount myself because of how I talk? Because who sets the
That's
standards,
interesting.
y'all? Who sets the standards? I'll tell you, it's the richest, whitest, oldest men in the room. And I think in spaces like this, we get to be really, brave and rebellious and mischievous, and start to wonder, what are those standards all about? And who is it keeping out? For any of us who want to run for office, or a less obvious way that we want to step into leadership, if we are stopping ourselves because we don't think we sound the part, who are we hurting? We're certainly hurting ourselves, but we're also hurting everyone coming up behind us who needs new
coming
models.
after us. Well, and I agree with you, and I do want to play with it more. And then equally, I want to acknowledge that the reason a lot of us code switch with our voice or try to conform is because that has helped us, right? That has helped us progress, that has helped us be taken seriously, that has helped us be heard, like literally.
Yes.
And so I'm interested to, you talk a lot about this in your book and your thought leadership that you do around this space, but like, research for a long time has told us that actually when we have a high-pitched voice and when we are super bubbly and excitable, there's not always a perception that we can be a leader, or that we can be a manager or a partner or a CEO or whatever the case may be. And so how do we balance the two between the societal expectations have looked like this for so long, and so we've adapted because we want to keep up, and yet it is radical to just be ourselves, but then ourselves doesn't always fit into these boxes. So it's kind of a conundrum, right?
100%. And I am a coach first and foremost. So I am very, very practical. And I think it's irresponsible coaching to tell people to do one or the other, right? Always sound like yourself. Everything else is out of integrity. That is impractical, as you suggest. But I'd like to say that the conversation has two parts to it. So one of them is the small adjustments and negotiations we all have to make to get taken seriously in the spaces, in the systems that already exist, right? So that is a question for each of us about, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on an era of our life basis, what do we want? If what we want is to get the job, to get the yes, to get the money, to get the funding at all costs or at most costs, what are we willing to negotiate away? Well, I'm going to perform this role in this space, and I'm going to roll my eyes privately and find my friends and primal scream, but like do what I got to do because I need more power before I can really do anything. And that's fine. I was about to swear and then I stopped myself. I don't know why. That's fucking fine, guys, right? I mean, I'm on a massive anti-shame campaign. So if what you want is to get the power and privilege and position so that you have more to spend for what you care about, fine. And if you are at the point where you have a little bit more, where you're in a position where you can play a little bit more, and you're like, what does that even mean? The answer might be that you start to say, this aspect that I have been negotiating away for all of my professional career is now non-negotiable. I am now going to need a workspace that takes me as me. I am now in the position where I can spend that privilege. And that is also a no shame situation. So, I used to call workshops how to use your voice to get what you want. It is useful to know what you want, because ideally we don't have to make a separation between, getting the thing and getting the feeling. But if we do, know which one today you want, and that will help with what version of you should show up in that space. And then the other part of this conversation I just want to slide in there is that that conversation happens in a lot of corporate spaces. It happens in a lot of business spaces. It happens in a lot of I need more power spaces. And that is real and it's fine. And when I talk to high school girls, and when we have spaces like this, I also want to bring in there's this amazing Toni Morrison quote, as you enter positions in power, as you enter positions of trust and power, dream a little before you think. And for me, what that means in this conversation is let's not forget there is a dream space, a dreamscape, where we all get to go, what kind of leadership do I want to see more of in the future? How do I embody that a little bit the next time I get the chance to speak, or maybe a lot bit, but to really keep alive, what kind of leadership do I want to see more of? If I want people who are emotionally available, who speak in a conversational way, who make it completely clear what they care about and what they don't, who are that level of unpolished so that you see the authenticity, you see what's real,
then
then that is my invitation to show up a little bit more like that every chance I get.
It's so interesting, isn't it? And it is, I agree. I love what you say about like, you've got to play within the rules of the game to get where you want to get, so that you've got the power to exert such that you can then be more authentic. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous that we're actually still trying to navigate this like very like tap dancey situation in 2023, but I guess here we are, for better or worse. And, it's funny, I reflect, even when I think back, like I can remember we had a drama teacher at school and he had this laugh that was very distinctive. And and he just like didn't hold back with this laugh, and literally the entire room, and like he stops rooms with this laugh. It was so intense in a good way. And then I think back, I'm like, why did we all stop at that? We were sort of all a bit awkward about it. It's such a beautiful laugh. And yet we'd obviously been socialized to think that there's a way that you laugh, and you don't laugh that loud, and you don't laugh like that, and it's kind of from such a young age, you get this conditioning, I suppose, that you have to fit in a box. It's kind of sad, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's right. There's this beautiful quote that I reference in my book. Nature teaches us to expand. The fear is learned. And of course we can look at, trees that expand. And there's so much unlearning, and so many of us are doing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the heart of the kind of work that Brene does, or Glennon Doyle, right, is about like, how do we get back to who we really are? How does the early version of us, right, the 2-3-year-old, the pre-socialized us, has so much wisdom, and yet we're in this socialized world, and how do we reconcile that? So I mean, I just like to bring the voice into that and make sure we're also thinking about what version of us shows up at scale. When we have the chance to speak in public, it's a question of bringing some version of ourselves to a bigger stage, whether it's literally or over Zoom. And what is the process? Can we do that intentionally, so we don't just accidentally perform old standards and old values that we don't even believe in?
And so for folks joining us today, and I know that I can see there's quite a few people in the Pep Talker community here who work in very large corporates, very traditional staid environments, multi-thousand people companies. So maybe for you or I, Samara, where we run our own business, perhaps we have a little bit more flexibility, because in many ways we don't answer to anyone. So we maybe can be a bit more radical, I suppose, in how we use our voice. For people who work within more of a structure, maybe they're at a law firm, or they're at a big tech, or, they're at a big bank or something. What are some little radical things that they could do, like baby steps, literally this week, to start to sort of play with what feels good for them in their voice, but also doesn't sabotage necessarily their career trajectory or the political capital that they've built up within an organization? Completely.
And inside of that is such a good invitation that if anybody here does want to come off mic and ask a specific question, we're so open to that. In general, though, what I'll say that is like doable on the level of like super easy doable is think about how you're prepping before you go in to give a pitch, say. What you're thinking about. So sometimes obviously what we're going to be thinking about is literally the words, right? Did I finish my deck? Do I know what I'm going to say after I say that thing? Then I'm going to say this thing. But some of it is allowing ourselves sometimes to get into worst case scenario wising, right? Which ties into, I think, these larger questions of public speaking. This weird, awkward phrase, I think, public speaking, is tied up for a lot of us with fear, with a fear-based approach that seems inevitable. It seems so intertwined. So if we were to do a 180 on that and bring in a love-based approach to public speaking, what would you think about in the moments before you go in to, say, pitch an idea to somebody who has more power than you? Well, one of the things you could do is focus on what you care about the most about what you're about to talk about, what you have shared, what your shared care is, right, with the other person, other people in that space, the deciders, and how you can radically take care of them. So this is like a bit of a provocative thought, because in the realm of tone, talking about tone, we can talk about warmth as something that comes up in all these studies. I mean, literally Harvard Business Review puts out a new one every week. The strength, warmth, balance, women and the double bind. How do you come across as both strong and likable enough to be kept around? Horrible. But I would love to suggest that strength comes from a true and believed I've got this, which is a confidence thing that we can talk about, right? What are all of our tips on confidence? And warmth comes from an actual fierce determination to take care of the other people in the space, even if they have more power than you in, some sort of hierarchical sense, or even if they don't technically deserve it. And what comes up around resentment there, which is completely fair, But I bring this up because radiating love to the room of people that you're about to go speak to, even if they quote unquote don't deserve it, is strategy, and it works.
Because you do this quite naturally. I feel like you radiate such a warm energy in all of the Instagram lives and LinkedIn lives and podcasts and video interviews that I see you do. So you do it very well. Smiling is something that helps me, and I think the research backs this up. You probably know the science of this better than I do, but if I'm about to go on a Zoom and I'm sitting like this, as opposed to if I'm about to go on a Zoom and I'm do this ridiculous smile, your face kind of, as I understand it, Samara, you can probably explain it better. As I understand it, your face lights up and there's this energy that is projected that is more warmth, to your point.
Well, and this is why I talk about the warmth or the nurturing or the taking care of, right? These also fit into these really big, broad, lady stereotypes, right? But it is, I think, more satisfying for a lot of people than just saying smile more, because there's such a perversion of that. There's such a history of that.
True.
And the smile, what you just beautifully performed for us, is the smile is what happens. It's the byproduct of
that love.
Just energetically, right? And that adjustment is saying, I am willing to take care of the other people in this space. And that is what happens on the inside, and it feels like that on the inside, and on the outside it might look like a lit upness.
So let's say if I'm going to speak to, let's say I've got a pitch to 3 or 4 execs, 2 of whom I quite like and I'd like to impress, one of whom is kind of a bit of a dodgy, the guy that you would want to avoid at a Christmas party, and I kind of hate him, but I have to kind of be polite because it's so. How would you what would your thought process be before you walked into that boardroom or that Zoom room to get yourself in a mindset away from, oh, he's so dodgy, I kind of hate him, I can't, to I'm going to actually act from a place of love to this presentation, to this room?
I'm also seeing a reference to Amy Cuddy in the chat, and I just want to say, because it's part of the answer to your question, I quote her in my book, not the power pose that's more obvious and that's all the TED Talk stuff, but there's this lower down, less well known and so juicy priming for power, which is my answer to your question. I call it priming for permission as well, because I think there's something different. There's something different energeticing when thinking about permission. Right. And by permission, I mean a feeling, an inner feeling in us of I am allowing to invite myself in all of the ways that actually bring me a sense of inner yay. I sometimes call it inner squirrely or mischief or joy or pleasure or delight, right? So a way that we actually center our own yay inside of a conversation. So, but here's what I would do right before you're about to go in and speak with this person. First of all, do think about common ground, right? What do we both have what do we both need in common? What do we both like, right? That's just that's negotiation strategy anyway, right? But the other part of it is bring to mind, and have a few of these ready, bring to mind a moment when you felt so seen by someone you admire. And it can be an email, a text, or whatever. It can be a friend. It doesn't have to be somebody, famous, but it can be. But a moment when you just felt so seen and bring that memory to mind. Have a few of them. I actually keep a few handy, and bring that memory to mind and literally breathe it in with your full body so that your body has the chance to kind of relive that memory on a visceral level, and let it do something to you. Because we can prime ourselves with those worst case scenarioizing before, a chat, a pitch, a conversation. And the worst case scenarioizing primes us too, but in the other direction, right? And an MRI scan will completely show you what that does to your brain, and it's super unpretty. And the opposite is available, but we have to actively do it, right? We're not going to accidentally bring to mind like a permission memory, but we can do it on purpose and it's available. And then we get to go, I am now primed for permission in a different way than I was. And I'm going to walk into that space with that. And I have from that capacity to take care of people who do and don't deserve it. It's not up to me to decide who does and doesn't deserve my love anyway, you know. I mean, in a boundaries conversation, it's totally separate. But when we're really talking about how do I get what I want from this person in a way that feels ethically good, well, what I have is that I can anticipate that they also actually want to feel love and belonging.
Of course. And we humans want that.
Humans want that.
Every human crave. I mean, yeah, that's what we want as humans: belonging.
I mean, and I give this really practical example in the final chapter of my book that is, if you know CPR and someone is choking in front of you and all the other people in the space are like having a panic attack, are you going to go, oh, but I don't really want to today, or I don't want to make it about me? There's so many standard things we do to go, I should close down. I don't want to make it about me. But if this is about CPR and someone is choking, you go straight in there and you take care of them. And the challenge with public speaking is, what if they're choking, they just don't look like it? And I have exactly what they need. I have exactly what they need. So the strength is I have exactly what they need. And the warmth is, and I want to give it.
That's such a reframe, isn't it? It's not like, instead of being like, oh my gosh, I'm going to vomit, I'm so nervous. The reframe is, I actually have such a great message to share, whether it's a meeting, whether it's on stage, whether it's in a Zoom presentation to a board, whatever. And it's actually the message that they need to hear right now. And what a privilege that I get to distribute that with my fabulous voice, by the way.
Well, and that kind of thinking, the priming yourself for permission, the thinking of the choking metaphor, these are actually designed to loosen your voice up, right? So much of our habits around speaking in high stakes moments has to do with hiding, vocal hiding, psychological hiding, right? Self-protection. So for example, monotone. For anybody who speaks, who finds that like you tend to speak in monotone when it's a really big high stakes thing, or you're talking about something that's super close to your heart, right? So I'm going into my throat here and I'm not using a lot of pitch variation. And it also sounds like vocal fry, which is a term that gets used all the time, but there you go. So this is this sort of thing. This can happen from a lot of reasons, but the main one is a habit of hiding. So then what, right? And you don't have to then what and police yourself in every moment of your life. Like, this is so meant to not feel that heavy and hard. But when you are thinking about something that you're going to go speak about, the practice is inviting yourself in, doing the permission work, doing the priming, right? Breathing more, chapter 1 of my book, which is, by the way, not just about breath. It's literally about what it takes to breathe deeply and invite yourself to take up as much space as your body actually takes up in spaces that were literally not built for us, which is the quote unquote public.
Yeah.
FYI.
Yeah. And I think that all of these conversations, I think sometimes it's very easy to say, oh, it's my voice, or it's like, it's the way that I'm showing up. But actually, I think, and there's a great piece in HBR on imposter syndrome by Ruchika, and I'll pop the link in the chat, that talks about this, that it's actually someone saying they love that. I don't know who that is, but yes,
I don't know. Yeah,
whoever that is. Yes, I agree. I'll put the article in, it's amazing. But basically it's like, it's not our fault. It's not your fault that you've been made to feel this way. It's just like, it's not Samara's fault that teacher said that stupid comment about her misuse of the voice, like whatever, like it's like, that's not your fault. But then it's our responsibility to, I guess, then figure out how do we tackle this society and this workplace that we're in, a time that we're working and living in, right? Which is unfortunately a product of systemic bias over hundreds and hundreds of years. The good news is that it's changing. and that you have the capacity to make those radical changes yourself.
Well,
in
and
whatever way
that it's
looks like for you.
collective. I love how you just
Yeah.
put that. I so appreciate that. But also, you know, I'm partly here just waving a flag, being like, does anyone want to hang out at this intersection with me? Because actually there's a dance party going on here. Like this is a group collective solidarity situation.
Correct. Yeah.
And when we feel the most alone is like when we can actually reach out to a friend and be like, I had this icky thing happen today where somebody said that I say like too much and it felt really shamey and I felt really alone. I'm just saying it so that it's less shamey and less alone. And I like pretty much guarantee your friend's gonna be like, oh my God, the same thing happened to me last week.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that collective, and I think, you know, one of the things that Brené Brown talks a lot about too is that bravery and that courage to share that story, to share that experience, such that other people then have the permission and the capacity to realize that firstly, they're not alone, and that actually maybe if they share and pay that forward, that might be the message that someone else needs to hear in that moment.
There's a question here that also ties into something I wanted to say. Liz asked this awesome question about how she has a New York accent, but when she goes somewhere else, she picks up other accents wherever she goes. And basically, she says, why do I do that? But I think underneath that is what's wrong with me. Why am I not normal? So I would love to say you are. And why you do that is part of what the foundation of the entire conversation we're having today, which is linguists will tell us that every habit any of us have ever picked up, we have picked up for a reason. We talk the way we do because of the rooms we have been in and what worked. So these questions of minor adjustments we can make now, this is a question, this is actually in a way, in a good way, a question of privilege. These are the questions we have when we are furious / annoyed, whatever, but often underneath is some real fury and ready for change. And that is a moment when we actually do probably have some power. And the question is, what habits that I picked up, because I am so malleable, because humans, Liz, are so good at mirroring the people around them, because we all have us energy and want to us versus themify, right? But the usness is strong. We want to find our tribe. We want to make sure that we're saying, I'm like you, I'm empathetic, right? We do this. And then we go, have I picked up habits that are actually getting in my way? I started saying like because my friends said like, nothing wrong with sounding like my friends. But what if now I'm realizing that level of hedging, that's because I'm softening the strength of what I want to say. And I think I can get away with stronger now. Let me try that out.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Again, it's the reframe, isn't it? Away from the negative connotation.
Totally. I mean, there's so much nuance in there, and it's so personal for all of us. Like how much safety we physically feel in a space affects this conversation, right? Like when you don't feel safe, that's not the room that the revolution is going to happen in. I mean, unless it is, but like that's for me as a coach, stand down, do what you need to do. But when you are feeling safe, when you are feeling a sense of power, or there's allies in the space, and you're like, ooh, what could I do here to bring in a little more joy for myself? Well, that's where we're having this conversation. What habits have I picked up that totally worked in those other rooms and that I now think I may have outgrown? What would that be?
And I think to your point as well, like practicing those new habits or those new ways of speaking or the new ways of using your voice in a space where you feel safe. And maybe that's at a barbecue. Maybe that's when you're talking to your partner, you know, before you watch Succession one Sunday night or whatever. Like it doesn't, you know, you can test things out and practice. And that's one of the things we talk a lot about, Samara, at Pep Talk Her. When you're negotiating for a salary, I don't want your first practice negotiation to be with your boss. Like, no, I want the first practice to be when you go to the grocery store and ask for a discount, knowing that you're probably going to get a rejection, and that's okay because the world will keep spinning. And perhaps it's the same thing if you're trying to work on strengthening how your arguments land in a conversation in the workplace. Perhaps you have a conversation with your roommate or something about, if you observe me doing this habit, I would love for you to let me know because I want to consciously start to shift that. That's something that I'm intentionally working on. And one thing that, you know, interesting, you mentioned that earlier, Samara, as well, like humans, we're hardwired actually for the negative. Unfortunately, our brains
I know.
have fairly strong neural pathways to want to go to the negative. And Liz mentioned this in the chat earlier. She has a folder where she saves the congratulations emails so that she can read them before a hard project or after a bad day. And Liz, it's like you read my mind. That's the entire reason why we built the Pep Talker app, for that exact reason, so that you can create a folder on your phone. The app's free, you can download it, and it will actually help you track those successes in the one location, so that before you go on stage, before you walk into that boardroom, before you go for that job interview, you can take a look at all the photos and the positive compliments you've received and get your brain and your mindset into that energy and take that with you, as well as your other permission stories, into that room, so that it is a more positive framing for that conversation, for your voice to feel permission to speak in its truest form. So I love all these examples that are coming through. Thank you for sharing them.
Maggie, what do you do before you speak publicly? Do you have like a ritual, or is it just sort of case by case?
You know, I love a bit of Amy Cuddy as well. And I have to say, once I spoke, one of our big clients is Salesforce, and they have a big conference in San Francisco called Dreamforce. It's like a very big thing. And I was speaking at a session that was just on the schedule after Barack Obama spoke. So no big deal. So we were pretty nervous backstage. So I was power posing, walking around the backstage. But similarly to you, I don't think I was as eloquent in my thought process as what you described earlier, Samara, but I'm going to take that as a lesson. But I always think about like something positive. I visualize what a successful conversation this is going to be, what wonderful energy I'm going to bring to this stage, like how it's going to be such a privilege to share my story. No one knows my story better than me, so I can't stuff it up. And it's kind of the same thing if you're going in to a presentation to brief the CEO or to pitch a marketing idea. No one knows that idea better than you. Like, they might not like it, but no one knows it better than you, right? So you kind of can't stuff it up because it's your story, it's your work that you've done. So I think just leaning into the fact that you know your stuff and it's just a conversation. So taking it away from being a presentation or a speech or a stage and just getting back to the basics of it's just a chat. It's just a communication channel, basically.
I love that. It's just a chat. It's just a chat, even at the highest level, right? I mean, it's surprising how far we often feel from that, right? When we're actually preparing. I mean, here's something I like to bring up that reminded me of. For all of us, you can make a list. You can start it today, right now, of who you like to listen to. Either in podcast form where you actually invite them into your intimate relationship in your own ears, or political figures or artists or activists or anybody who in the last year, say, you have seen a clip of them speaking and you felt the physical urge to pass it on to somebody else, right? Like, what makes things go viral? It's that physical urge of like, ooh, I can't just experience this alone. I want to share it. That want, who makes you go, ooh? And then you can get a little critical on what critical, good critical, like just critiquing. You can go, what are they doing that's different than what, if you Google, how do I sound authoritative? You will see the list of what we're supposed to do, all of the shoulds that are utterly joyless and sometimes work. And then you can put that whole conversation aside for a little bit, all of the like, do I, don't I, how much, what, how, and you just get to sit with AOC or Esther Perel or Barack Obama and go, what are they doing? Well, they have an accent that sounds like where they're from. They seem quite unapologetic about showing up with that accent. They are showing a level of emotional availability that feels very exciting. I feel that I see them in that same way that we fall in love with an actor in that moment when they say, in Bridgerton or whatever, I've loved you all along. And you just see them like open up and you're just like sitting home being like, I love you too, right? That is what public speaking is. It's not different. We human over here, we human over here. So we're looking at those people, AOC, all those people who are speaking about what matters to them. And you can start to notice, what are they doing exactly? How much pitch range are they doing? Are they stuck in their throat? Or are they inviting themselves out to do something more vulnerable? Out of your throat, inevitably more vulnerable. And the goal of this is not to then, try to sound like them. we're trying to get away from that kind of thinking, right? But rather that they
Right.
give us permission to show up like a version of ourselves that cares out loud. That's a phrase that I made up just finding it in the writing of this book, because to care out loud is the heart of impact. We will not make an impact if we are unwilling to care out loud. And caring out loud is hard because we're all so socialized to hide that we care. It's scary.
I've put two examples, Samara, in the chat of people that I love to listen to. I know there's some people, I think as well, you know, English is my first language. I speak Italian, but I rarely communicate professionally in Italian. And so I haven't experienced what it's like to communicate with an accent in the workplace and the discrimination and bias that comes with that. So if anyone has any questions, I know there's been a few comments in the chat, please pop them in the chat or jump off of mute. There's two people that I love to listen to. Millie Ford on TikTok. She's a comedian. I guess she's an influencer. She's hilarious. And she just doubles down, leans into the comedy of it, leans into the cringe nature of that very strong Australian accent. I find her hilarious, but she just sort of really owns it, which I kind of love. And then on the very other end of the spectrum, Carla Harris, who, Samara, I'm sure you've seen speak before. She is extraordinary. And she pulls no punches. You should listen to her podcast with Adam Grant. I'll pop the link in the chat as well. I learn so much every time I hear Carla speak about setting boundaries in the workplace, having clear communication. She's no bullshit. She's just like, it is what it is, like, and here's the parameters, you know? So she's got great tips as well, Samara, on communicating in a way that is fair and clear, but still, you know, don't take advantage of her, which I love. And she definitely communicates that in her voice as well.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Oh, I love this. Sharing the wealth of, you know, as I like to call them, new sounds of power, is so useful, because you know what happens? Because of the white, patriarchal, colonial world that we live in, one thing that happens, really, I think below the level of conscious thought, is that we can collect these, but if we aren't really active about it and talking about it and critiquing, as I say, right, thinking through what's working, we might accidentally, when it's our chance to speak, revert back to the old shoulds, and we aren't really taking the lesson. So it's something we have to actually do intentionally, or else there is a sort of cultural amnesia.
And that's where that consistent, small, radical steps over time become ripples, which with time become waves of change, which I'm excited for everyone here to be a part of. We've got a question that's come through from Eleanor, which I think is interesting. What do you do if there's a situation, an environment, a meeting where even though you've prepped, even though you've focused on stepping into your permission and you're communicating with love, the message just falls flat, or people don't want to hear it, or they don't like it, or they're not receptive? How do you handle that? Because instinctively, I just say, well, that's on them and that's not your fault. But it's very hard. Like, that's like great theoretically to be like, I don't care. I have communicated with love. Who cares? But if everyone's sitting there like this, like, it's really awkward, isn't it, to communicate to them if you feel like they hate you?
You get to decide. The answer to the question is, how do you want to interact with, like, what is the goal? If the goal is just to get out of there, that is not my audience, fine. I mean, that Maggie just gave a great example of that, right? Too bad, my genius is wasted on you, and you leave. But I think your question suggests that you'd prefer to stay in there and solve it. And so I offer this. And actually, I did just talk about this at Telemundo, and the clip just got posted today. So I'll say the same general idea, but when your audience seems to have lost you or not be with you for whatever reason, the strongest, I think, most brave, but also most strategic thing you could possibly do is say, I'm having trouble reading you. Does anyone want to talk about how you're feeling? What's happening? What can I do to help?
Whoa. So just call it out. Just be like, so if you're in a meeting at work and you're just getting crickets from the audience, just call it. I love that.
Because every monologue is actually a dialogue, right? We are all in this shared room with the capacity to speak. So you were giving them permission to speak, right? So A, that, but B, you're naming the true thing in the space. And when we name the true thing, we make connection. And when we ignore the true thing, we break connection. The example I gave when I was talking about this at Telemundo is if there's a loud sound in the room and you up on stage, like, try to just ignore it and like pretend it's not there. Oops, now we don't live in a shared reality. Oops, like, the audience instantly loses trust in you. but you go, oh, was there a loud sound? Did you all hear that? Is everybody okay back there? We've re-entered a shared space.
Oh my gosh.
Now humaning again.
I love this. And actually, I was at the Forbes Women Conference maybe 6 months ago in New York City, and Blake Lively, she was on stage, looking stunning as always, and she had hectic earrings on, and I mean, like, they were from here to here. And she walked on stage and she sat down and she was like, hi, and because she had a lapel microphone on, you could hear this
So real.
and we were all sitting there going, oh, so awkward, oh god, and she was like, and no one could hear. It was just so, and eventually she just went, can anyone hear me? Are these annoying? And we're all like, yeah, they're really annoying. And she's like, okay. She just took them off and she's like, should we start again? And we were like, oh, thank God for that, because that was awkward. And she just called it. And it was actually really good, because otherwise my lasting memory would have been like, remember that time she didn't even realize that the earrings were awkward.
Right.
She just called it. So I think that's like, you know, and I don't know if that's something that they teach you in Hollywood or whatever, but like that's what she did. And it worked so well. It broke the ice. We all had a lull, and then she kept talking and it was great, you know?
Name the true thing. Name the true thing. So if the true thing is, I can't read you all, are you disagreeing with me, or are you just sort of checked out because we're used to being Zoom partners for each other, and you're not giving me it? And I would love to know what's going on. Does anybody here want to say anything?
Yeah, because if nothing else, they might be like, honestly, can we crack a beer it's like Friday, can we just have a beer while we're doing this session? Or they might be like, you've got a piece of basil in your teeth and we keep looking
or they
at it.
might say, this is not the direction we're planning on going with this project. And then you have to grapple with that, but it's a real thing instead of the, worst case scenario in your head thing. And
and at least to your point,
happen.
if you had a half-hour slot allocated, and if you call it at 15 minutes, at least you don't waste the rest of your 15 minutes going on the wrong track. And then you can say, okay, well, I've misread the brief. Let me hear from you what you want, and I'm going to come back to you.
Well, and also I recently had a moment of cultural miscommunication, I think, when I was in London talking about my book, and I had this wonderful event that was interactive, but not as much as I'm used to in the States, quite honestly. And afterwards, the room full of Brits were effusive. Oh my gosh, they came up and we signed books and they told me their stories and they were like emotional. And I didn't see that during the thing. But what did I do? I constantly checked in. Is this landing? Does anybody have anything you want to say? And that got them doing more of it. But the reality is, we sometimes just do not know what's going on inside of someone's head. A friend of mine who I adore loves to talk about the fact that there are people who process differently, and that those of us, myself included, I think you as well, who are intensives, we are happy to talk out loud. I don't need the questions in advance. I do better when I'm like organically being in the space with people, reading what they need. And that is not how all of us are. And the opposite is called expansives. And this is people who need some time to process. And that is beautiful. And human brains are beautiful and diverse. So when we are reading an audience, we are sometimes misreading an audience.
That is such a great point for us all to remember. And there's a great question that's come through from Sakura. I'd love your thoughts on this. Basically, if English is your second language, for example, and you are getting feedback in the workplace that you say and ah too much, but actually that is a process that you go through because it helps you to be able to process and continue the conversation in a language that isn't your native tongue. What is the line between agreeing with folks who say you actually really need to work on that, it's unprofessional, versus saying, well, I'm actually going to use this as an opportunity to educate someone on cultural differences? And perhaps that may apply to people who may observe misogynistic language in the workplace, mansplaining. So what's the line between calling people out in that moment versus actually taking that feedback potentially and integrating that into your practice going forwards?
I think that is such a great question. And the answer is so damn personal because it is so based on the context of the space you're in and how much, honestly, margin you have to play with. So, and I think the reality of our lived experience, I think there's a lot of black and whiteification in this space, right? Don't police women, police women's voices. And I'm like, the reality of our lived experience is in the gray area in between. So for Sakura, The question is, when you get that advice, does it land as, ooh, this is a growth moment for me? Or does it land as, honestly, they are showing me their voice bias, and now I have to decide whether to call them out on it or not. And hopefully this conversation gives you more confidence that it might be that one, right? If we haven't named it as voice bias yet, or accent bias, then here we go, right? So this is real, this is a thing. Linguists have written reams of articles about it. So every one of us has accent bias. The question is, what wiser second thought do we have? And for those of us who are experiencing it every day, because English is our second language, and as you say, we're working in our second language, the question is always, is this an opportunity to educate and call someone in? Or is it a chance for me to decide what hill I do and don't want to, die on, fight on, whatever. So,
and I mean, is it a combination? Could it be both?
I mean, that's the gray area. That's what I mean by the gray area, right? I mean, when someone tells us, let's take the English as a second language out for a second. When anybody says to us, I heard your interview, wow, you say like a lot. I will make myself the heart of this story. Someone said that to me once. And I thought to myself two things simultaneously, because y'all, I'm here for the nuance. The gray area is what's real. I thought two things. One, oh my gosh, how embarrassing. I wish I didn't say like so much. And two, oh, what they're hearing is markers of my generation, of who I spend time with, of who they speak, how they speak, of how useful like is. I mean, this amazing author, Amanda Montell, has this book, Word Slut, that talks about all the six different uses of, totally. I had her on my podcast very early on, and I was like, blah, blah, blah. Totally. So, but that first thought, the, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. That one, I was like, what is in here that I can learn? Well, I'll say this, and it's real. The more that I believe that my thoughts are worth following, right? We're talking about thought leadership. The more that I believe that what I am describing matters to people, that I am of value, that I am doing important work, the fewer likes I speak with. So now it's not a question of, do I take that person's advice or don't I? It's a question of, what is that hedge doing for me, and what is it not doing for me? And how has it helped me soften? I mean, I sort of referenced this earlier, right? How does it help me soften difficult things to hear and find? And how is it not that? It's not actually serving a purpose except to keep me small.
And how do you want that to inform how you communicate and how you're heard going forward?
And honestly, there's so much out there about like trying to stop counting your ums and recording them or having other people do it and blah, blah, blah. And fine. I'm not here to like throw at everyone else's conventional wisdom. Some of that is useful, great. But I am here to say something different, which is, when we believe that our own thoughts matter, we will naturally say and less. When we believe we are allowed to take pauses, we will take pauses. And this is an inside job that has to do with value and worth and these much deeper questions of what it is to take up space in the world, to be English as a second language and not apologize in any way for the fact that we are English out loud right where we stand. And they hired us.
And they want you to be in that room, for sure. We could do a whole session on pause, I think. I would love to get to that. Now, I'm actually a very strict timekeeper, and I've naughtily gone over time.
I noticed this about you.
I know, but Mary has her hand up. So Mary, did you want to quickly jump off of mute with your question? Go ahead.
It can be quick. I'm actually a reformed and recovering speech pathologist, and I wanted to ask this for myself. I also am a speech coach. So I thought I'd do it here, and so everyone can see this. I get super anxious asking questions in like situations like this. So in general, public speaking, I'm okay, but there's something about this that makes me like heart pound. And then also, if I do hold it together, it's actually not before a speech or a presentation, it's right after. and then I kind of lose it and I get shaky, but always after. Is that something that you have any insight in or can share about? And maybe someone else has that and they would.
When
benefit from that
the
question.
stakes are high, adrenaline is present. And then there's on a totally body level, right, is what you're talking about, chemically. Once the adrenaline, does this thing, plunges, our body has a reaction. And if we're not vigilant, that reaction can turn into mean, cruel self-recrimination, right? Why did I let that one moment? As Maggie said, right? We have this like 10-to-1 negativity to positivity bias. So, right, why did I let that one moment? So part of it is going, ooh, oh, what a lovely opportunity to just be absolutely as loving to myself as I just asked myself to be to my audience. How do I just love hard on myself for that brave act of showing up and speaking on my own convictions in a world that was not built for me?
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
And
also
Mary,
question asking, totally. Question asking, going back to your first part, I like to think of question asking as a form of leadership. Because when we ask a question, we are often doing it on behalf of other people too. You don't have to say out loud, I'm asking this question and I wonder if other people have this thought too, but you can think that, or you can say it, but just knowing that when you ask a question, you're doing a kind act for the community.
Awesome.
And no doubt if you're thinking it, other folks are too. Mary, we're so grateful that you asked that question. And I actually talk a lot about this, Samara, in the Pep Talker program. I always say to people, if you have anxiety or fear around speaking, or you're not super comfortable, and that's something that you want to work on, if that's a muscle you want to build, I always liken it to a muscle you have to build. Asking questions or saying something at the start or the end of a meeting is a really great baby step to sort of get a little bit more comfortable.
100%. And not only that, you know what another good one is I call it rogue moderating. When you're in a meeting, let's just say a meeting, and you have nothing to add, you have nothing you need to add, you have no burning thing, but you can tell someone else has been wanting to get a question in forever, and the moderator, the actual, official formal moderator hasn't noticed. You just go, oh, sorry, I just want to say, Mary, did you have something you wanted to say?
Inserted yourself into that conversation. Love it.
Oh my gosh. And you might even feel the whole full body reaction to being seen, right? Your nervous system, your vocal fry, not your vocal fry, your cortisol hitting your vocal cords, right? All the things, but you're doing it because you're practicing. It's a practice. And it obviously also has the benefit of hopefully evening out an unfair space.
Totally. Oh my gosh, I love it. There's so many tips that have come from today's conversation. We're going to post this recording because I feel like folks might want to actually watch it back. But the thing that I'm going to take away from this, Samara, is to really lean into communicating with love. I've never thought about it like that. And can you rephrase it again? You said the permission story. Is that right? Am I using the right term? Before I go on stage, I should channel a permission story. Is that the right phrasing?
You know what? I like that. Yeah. No, I tend to say priming for permission.
Okay, that's much more eloquent. Priming for permission. I'm going to prime myself for permission before every future speech. I hope that you all can do that as well in the workplace. And let's just be a bit radical this week. Let's just take a radical action. I don't know what that's going to be for you. Samara, what's your radical action that you're going to take this week?
Oh my gosh, I'm about to start announcing different ways that people can work with me starting next week and the week after. And that is just like such a different mode than like my book is available for purchase. So I think the radical act I'm going to take is like loving hard on the process of marketing myself.
Well, and you know what? I was listening to a podcast today, and I'll send it to you. It's a bit bro-y, but the one thing I did take away from it that I liked and that aligned with me was it was similar to what you're saying. And it was like, if you have a way you can help people, you've helped so many famous people who we all watch on TV all the time. And like, what a privilege to be able to talk to your community, to let them know that if they want that support too, it's actually possible. Like, it's actually an act of service to share your skill and your zone of genius with the world. And so I'm excited to see you do that. And we're here cheering you on. Make sure that you check out Samara on LinkedIn, grab her book, use it as a birthday present for folks, use it as a holiday stuffer present.
Mother's Day is coming up.
Mother's Day, a just because gift, you know, if you're trying to get in the good books with your boss or a colleague, I don't know if you've got a mentee, a mentor, highly recommend it. And check out Samara. She's on Instagram as well, LinkedIn. She's always posting super insightful thought leadership content around permission to show up at work, to use your voice and to speak. So I hope that you've learned as much from this conversation as I have. This has been such a delight. Connect on LinkedIn. A few people have popped their links in the chat. Feel free to pop yours in as well. Let's just build this community and pay it forward. Like if you've learned something today, please share it on Instagram or LinkedIn and tag Samara and I. We would love to share that as well. And let us know what your radical act is going to be this week so that we can hold you accountable and cheer you on from the sidelines as well. Samara, thank you. I've taken up double the time that I said that I would. So, you know, that was a bit radical of me, but there we go.
Oh, my pleasure. And also I'm putting the information in the chat. Leela Singh is the one who talks about the expansive versus intensive, which I think is a really useful way to remember that everybody's brains works differently.
Yeah.
And overall, thank you so much. I love being in this community. I love being in conversation with you. What a gift. What an absolute gift.
What a treat. No, it's such a pleasure. And we're going to continue this conversation. Stay in touch, everyone, with us, with Samara, with myself. I'm Maggie Palmer. This is Samara Bay. This has been a fabulous conversation. I'm sorry that we took up double the time that we said we would, but I hope that it's been valuable and actionable. We'll post the recording and we'll send that around to you on email. So if you wanted to share it with family, friends, or other folks who might also learn something from this, please feel free. And let's stay in touch. Thanks so much, everyone. Appreciate your time. Cheers.